I am old enough now to pour tea without looking at the cup, old enough to know when the steam finds my cheek that a day will be gentle or not. My name is Catherine. I am a mother, and I'm telling you this from a later, quieter porch, long after the night I set a box back into a drawer and chose a door I could never close again. If you stay with me to the end, I will tell you how I rebuilt a life not by punishing a man, but by refusing to live small inside his shadow. When I first met Marcus, summer was humming like an appliance that never quits. He had that kind of smile that makes you forget your careful shoes. He said my name as if it could crack and he didn't want to be the reason. In those days attention felt like proof, and I told myself that proof was love, early dates with too much butter on the popcorn, walking home through warm air that smelled like lawn clippings and the blue-throated music from someone's radio. We married in a church with windows that made noon behave, danced badly and laughed like laughter was a savings account that could not run out. I grew up in a small house that ironed its curtains on Saturday and kept a jar for buttons that lost their way. My mother taught me steady things, how to stretch soup, how to fold grief like laundry and put it away for later. A home is a ship, she said. You will not always like the weather. You must learn the ropes. I thought I had. I thought I knew storms when I saw them. We had a son, Michael, with hair that stood up in the morning like he'd had an argument with sleep. Years later he would marry a girl named Jennifer who laughed like a promise and who ate the frosting off cupcakes first. Remember her name? I did not in the way that matters, not then. Before the storm there were small breezes I didn't read right. Marcus wanted photographs of his kindness. He liked me grateful in public. He could go quiet for 2 days if I didn't praise him with the right tone. If I asked where he'd been, he asked why I didn't trust him. If I cried, he called me dramatic. You can live a long time inside a performance you don't know you're giving. The day I found the first receipt, it was for a dinner I didn't eat, 2 glasses of champagne, a steak he always claimed he didn't like, a dessert that came to the table with a sparkler. Client, he said, smiling at the screen. The next week a lingerie bag tucked deep in the closet like a small joke. Then a hotel invoice folded into the car manual as if paper could turn into wiring if it waited long enough. Then a little orange bottle that wasn't mine, blue tablets that promised what love used to do without help. And a box in the drawer we hadn't opened in months, condoms we didn't need, not for the life we were living. I didn't confront him. Not then. Sometimes silence is not surrender, it's a rope you throw ahead of yourself to the shore. I wrote what I found down like recipes, date, place, charge, the way the house smelled when he came back late, hotel soap and someone else's perfume wearing a coat of laundry detergent. I counted days, I counted lies. I told no one. Does a woman become invisible all at once, or is it a dozen small disappearings? If any of this feels like your kitchen, the good light, the bad quiet, write 1 word below so I can see you, here. I will hold your place at the table until you catch your breath. Stay with me, the worst hasn't happened yet. And neither has the best. I started taking long walks at dusk, when the neighborhood smelled like sprinklers and charcoal and the sky did its soft blue apology for whatever the day had done. I walked past other people's windows, families clinking plates, a dog resenting a bath, a kid spelling tomorrow out loud twice. It steadied me to remember that life exists beyond the room where your name is being edited. The evidence continued its quiet parade. Hotel invoices tucked under magazines. Lingerie tags in the trash under coffee grounds, as if love were a crime scene you could hide with a spoon. Flowers delivered to the office on days when I got a text, long meeting, pizza in the fridge. I am not proud of the next thing I say. I picked up his phone once and it didn't ask for a password. A thread of messages opened the air. She was called J, baby with a heart, a plan for Friday with a smile I didn't recognize. There were photographs. There were jokes at my expense, wrapped in emojis to make the words go down. There was a name, and it was not unfamiliar. Jennifer. I closed the phone. I bent over the sink and watched the water become itself. Do you think betrayal has a temperature? Mine was room temperature calm, and then a fever later. I did not scream. I did what the mothers in my family have always done when the house shifts under their feet. I made a list. Separate accounts. Credit freeze. A lawyer with a sharp mind and a soft voice. Copies of everything in a folder that did not live in my house. What I did next, I will say only once, and then leave it behind because it is neither a lesson nor a trophy. In a moment of shaking anger held together by perfect stillness, I tampered with a thing no one should ever alter. I am not going to tell you how. I will never tell anyone how. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It could have hurt more people than the person who deserved the truth I was not brave enough to speak. When you are drowning, you will call any plank a boat. That night, I mistook a match for a plank. 2 days later, the phone rang. He was in the emergency room, the nurse said. Severe reaction. He needed his wife for forms because that's what my name was still for them, signature, history, contact in case of a heart that stops. The hospital smelled like lemon wipes and old coffee and the expensive kind of fear. I walked past the nurse's station and the vending machines humming their mechanical lullaby. And then I saw him, white sheets, red face, a doctor explaining in words that belonged in a different life. Beside him, clutching her purse like it would testify, stood Jennifer. She looked up and her mouth dropped open and then closed, like a door that doesn't know what it wants. Family only, the nurse said gently, and Jennifer, because panic is clumsy, blurted, I am his, and the word after that made a sound inside me I will not try to describe. My son's wife. My son's wife. I stepped back. The hallway tilted and then righted itself. It is strange, the way clarity can arrive like cold air, cruel, crisp, honest. I turned to the doctor and waited until he finished with words about reactions and rashes and choices adults could have made differently. I did not look at Marcus. I did not speak to Jennifer. Sometimes the truest sentence is the one you choose not to say. In my bag, beside the folder with dates and charges and photographs, were divorce papers my lawyer had asked me to carry when I was ready to be brave. I signed my name in the cafeteria with a pen attached to the counter. When I walked back upstairs, I handed the envelope to Marcus without touching his fingers. This is the last thing I will do for you, I said. It will save you time. He opened his mouth to argue with the shape of my face and then closed it because the shape did not change. That night, at home, I called my son. Michael, I said, and the sound of his name in my own voice made me feel the day he was born all over again, the blue knit hat, the small stern mouth that didn't like the new light. You need to come by in the morning, I said. I have something to show you. I didn't sleep. I set out the photographs like a terrible altar. Dawn arrived with its usual humility. He is my child. There is no sentence that replaces that one. What I did next, I did as gently as a person can tear a bandage that covers a wound someone else made. Michael stood in my kitchen looking too young for the wedding ring on his hand. The light was kind, which felt unhelpful. I poured coffee I knew he wouldn't drink. Mom, he asked, and the word opened 100 doors. I told him we were walking into a hard room. I told him I would not speak a single sentence I could not prove. I told him that the truth would not make time run backward, but it might stop it from running over him. He looked at the photographs, one after another, as if they could become something else if he were patient. Receipts, messages, the hotel invoices, the perfume-thin jokes, the gift charges on days without a holiday, his father's face reflected in a restaurant window beside a woman who was not me. He sat down. He looked at his hands like they had been doing something without permission. Mom, he said, how long have you known? I told him not long enough to save him pain, long enough to save him years. I did not mention the reckless thing. There are truths you keep because they help no one to tell. He left quietly, the way a good man leaves a room that suddenly doesn't fit. Later that day, he called. His voice was a scraped thing, but steady. I spoke to a lawyer, he said. I need the copies. I brought them to him without advice. Advice is salt. Truth is bread. He needed bread. What followed could fill 3 lifetimes or none. Papers that learned our names, this court and that courtroom, Jennifer's mother calling me, furious with her own grief, Marcus sending long emails blaming the weather, blaming work, blaming me for the shape of his loneliness, and me not answering. I learned the names of clerks and the hours when certain windows were open. I learned to keep everything in a calendar because grief will steal your appointments if you let it. I learned you can run out of crying and still have tears left for other people. At night I walked. The neighborhood had changed its smell to late summer, dust warmed by tires, tomatoes in someone's garden giving up a little sweetness to the air. I made 3 truths each evening before sleep, because the mind needs a landing strip. The tea is warm. The window is open. The light is kind. If I needed a 4th, I wrote, I did not cause this. In the morning I would add, I will not let it keep me. Then came the day Michael knocked with a different posture. Jennifer had confessed the part she could not deny. He had moved out. He asked me to keep a box of his things until he could breathe in a new place without needing to count the breaths. Do you think I'm less of a man for not seeing it? He asked. No, I said. I think you're more of a man for not becoming it. I started therapy with a woman who kept her tissue box on a little wooden tray, which told me she respected the ritual of crying. We did not talk about Marcus first. We talked about my quiet. How long I had been using it to keep the peace while it kept me small. We talked about the price of silence, how it collects with interest. What does repair look like if you don't use revenge as a tool? She asked. The question sat beside me for weeks like a cat deciding whether to climb into my lap. If any of this is your hallway, boxes at the door, a calendar with too many circles, tell me one word below, steady. We will breathe on the count of 4 and then again. And if you want to keep walking with me, come. The street lights are on. The sidewalk knows our feet. Repair looks like small things done with respect. It looks like the first Saturday I didn't check my phone when it buzzed because I had no one left to perform for. It looks like washing the good towels and hanging them on the line because the sunlight asked nicely. It looks like buying a cheap bouquet at the grocery store and giving myself permission to pick the loudest color. It looks like learning to sleep on the diagonal just because no one else is there to complain. It looks like standing at the sink at dusk and letting the water run cold, then warm, then cold again, because choice is a muscle that needs practice. I made a map for the new life, therapy on Tuesdays, dinner with an old friend on Thursdays, church on Sundays because the music helped my spine. I joined a ceramics class taught by a patient man with hands like river stones. At first my bowls were a little drunk. Then they were just bowls. I planted basil in a chipped pot and forgave myself for overwatering. I wrote letters to the girl I was at 24 and tucked them into a cookbook my mother left me, the one with the gravy stain that looks like a country I haven't visited yet. And then, on a day that smelled like rain that couldn't make up its mind, I met David. The community garden had posted a notice, volunteers needed to trellis the tomatoes that were leaning like old men after a long story. He showed up with twine and the kind of gentleness that doesn't need an audience. He is a widower with a weathered wedding band he still wears some days, the way a person keeps a photograph on the mantel even after repainting the room. He listened more than he spoke. He asked me if I liked blackberries, then handed me a small paper basket of them without a speech. We walked twice, and then we walked again. He never asked me to explain myself like a defendant. He never made my wounds his entertainment. He never reached for my hand until the evening I reached for his. I like the person I am when you're near, he said once, and I wrote it down later because good sentences deserve a home. Meanwhile, life was correcting itself where it needed to. My divorce finalized with fewer fireworks than loneliness had promised. Michael's case wound forward with the slowness of institutions that try to be fair. Jennifer moved back to her mother's for a while and then out again, carrying her heartbreak like a suitcase with one wheel off. Marcus learned how regret feels when the lights are off and there's no one left to lie to. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him well. I wished him quiet enough to hear himself. Sometimes at night, in that old hour when my heart used to rehearse 1,000 bad futures, I now brewed tea and stood by the window. The neighborhood gave me its inventory, a siren that passed without stopping, a train far off like a long thought, a neighbor's laugh spilling out before he tucked it back in. I would put my palm on the cool glass and say out loud, just to hear the word fill a room and behave, enough. If this is your season of small repairs, say one word below, begin. And if you want a seat next to me while I learn, subscribe. Not for numbers, for company. For the relief of knowing someone else remembers how to breathe through the long parts. The last time Marcus asked to see me, it was at a cafe with a bell on the door that tinkled like a memory that won't take a hint. He had grown older in a way that wasn't about years. He kept touching his ring finger like he couldn't believe it was empty. "I'm sorry," he said, but not with a plan, with a posture. I nodded because the past deserved at least that much. He told me he'd made mistakes and then waited for me to make them smaller. I didn't. "You didn't just step into a hole," I said. "You brought a shovel." He looked at the table. "I miss the life," he said. "You miss the convenience," I answered, quietly enough to be kind, firmly enough to be honest. He didn't argue. Some men only learn to listen when the house is empty. When he stood to go, he reached for a hug and I offered my hand. "Take care of yourself," I said. He nodded. The bell tinkled. The room learned my new air. Michael came by that night with a pizza that pretended to be healthy and a face that no longer flinched at shadows. We sat on the floor like college kids and watched a game neither of us cared about. "Thank you," he said, not for the evidence, not for the way I had walked him through the courthouse, but for the way I had not let my bitterness make a home in him. "I don't feel ruined," he added, surprised. "I feel awake." We laughed at that, the good kind, the kind that doesn't have sharp edges. David planted lavender beside my porch. It smelled like a memory I was allowed to keep. Some nights we eat at my little table and he leaves the plates to soak, which I used to hate and now don't mind because I've learned the difference between leaving mess and leaving me. He never calls me dramatic when I cry at a commercial with a dog. He never corrects my laugh. He never asks where I am when I am exactly where I said I'd be. Do you think forgiveness and justice are enemies? I don't. Justice is the fence you build, forgiveness is the air you breathe inside it. For a long time I thought revenge was power. It isn't. Power is choosing not to live in the room where someone else left your name in pieces. Power is deciding that your first thought in the morning will not be a man who already took too much. Power is paying attention to the way sunlight insists on the corner of your kitchen table even on a cold day. If you are here at the end, tell me one word in the comments so the next person knows where to sit when they arrive. Here, steady, begin. Tell me one small habit that keeps your name belonging to you. And if you want to visit this room again, soft, truthful, made of breathing, subscribe. Not for numbers. For company. For the slow, patient fact that we can start over and call it not revenge but respect. Sometimes, before sleep, I write my 3 truths like a recipe card I don't want to lose. The tea is warm. The window is open. The light is kind. And a 4th, because I earned it, I am not defined by what broke me. I am the woman who chose to repair.